my name is Carolyn, and today we are going to do the worst and best romances of 2025. I've read quite a few romances this year. Most of them were somewhere in between. Some were really bad, and some were, or very few, were very, very good. So let's get started. Worst romances of the year. Now, I am including romantasy into this list, so if you do see romantasy in this list, I think personally it counts more as romance. And I didn't really read that much romantasy to warrant a separate video, so here we go. So one of the worst books that I read this year was Quicksilver by Callie Hart. Maybe this is unfair because I actually didn't finish the book, but honestly that should tell you a lot about this book. Because I remember the exact moment when I quit this book. And it starts with a B and ends in bitch in heat. And that's all you need to know. The dialogue was so cringy, it wasn't even fun. There was, I don't know, barely any interesting and creative world building. Both the FMC and NMC were not any different from any other heroes or heroines out there. The FMC is typical like badass warrior type, and the MMC was insufferable jokester who is almighty and all-powerful, and the best thing that's ever happened to you in bed. And that was it. And I'm so sick of romantasy books like this. Every single one of them is basically the same. It's hard to tell the difference. So there's that. And the second worst book that I read this year was also a romantasy. It's called What Lies Beyond the Veil. This one was not so much offensive as it was boring, because it was so, how do I say this? It was just so bland. It was white bread, and not the good kind either. There was no creativity in the world building, just typical fae world building. As if the fantasy aspect wasn't good enough, as if the fantasy wasn't bad enough, the romance was so bad. It was so bad. First of all, we were supposed to believe that there was like a fated aspect to their relationship, and the MMC kept saying that to her, but that's just a sorry excuse for no relationship building at all. He was also very creepy and overbearing. There was barely any world building. All I remember about the world building is a bunch of trees. They were traveling somewhere. Fairies with some powers, unexplainable powers, and yeah, that was it. That was it. So yeah, honestly, I think these two books were probably just the worst books that I read all year long, and I'll just leave it at that. Let's move on to some honorable mentions, shall we? First one I'm going to mention is Married to the Mountain Man by Ursa Dax. This is actually part of a series of interconnected sci-fi romances about a bunch of aliens who live on this penal colony out on some other planet, and basically there is a bride program on Earth where each of these aliens get a bride from this program. And it sounds very weird, but for a bunch of novellas, there is actually so much world building to this world, and each novella builds upon the next one in terms of world building, and then we see like the previous characters again. So it's actually, just by looking at the cover, you wouldn't think this would be so cozy, but it is so cozy, and it's not just a bunch of smut, which is kind of crazy to say because I feel like a lot of romance novellas really focus on getting from point A to point B to point C, the smut in most cases, and then obviously the HEA, but they try to fit in as many smut scenes as possible in between. But this one, there's actual yearning, there's actual relationship building, there's actual just miscommunication in the sense that, you know, these two people need to learn about each other. There's a lot of, don't get me wrong, this is not something like earth-shattering or anything, but honestly it kind of is for a romance novella. There is so much greatness and coziness packed into these novellas. Ursa Dax is an amazing writer in this genre, and she actually made me want to read more sci-fi romances, and it kind of tells you a lot when I want to read all of the novellas in the series, and I think I actually have, aside from one of them. So I would definitely check this out if you're looking for just a sweet, cozy, good time. Yeah. Vividly Yours by Ivy Fairbanks. This one is a contemporary romance about a woman who is a cartoon creator, Ivy, and then the MMC is named Callum, and he actually works in a mortuary, which is something you don't see every day in a romance book. Let me tell you that. This one was also really sweet. This one had the trope of a black cat golden retriever, where the MMC is the cat. He doesn't really get a lot of, like, you know, social interaction from his job, and people don't really understand him. But the FMC is a little bit like on the ditzy side, very social and kind of in your face, but they work so well together. It kind of reminded me of the dynamic in the movie Clueless, which is honestly the best dynamic ever. And it was just something so sweet about it, and it's a very slow building romance too. There's which is too, it's a positive and a negative, because in that it is that slow building, sometimes there's a lot of repetitiveness to it, but I think it made up for it because there's just so much character development, and each one of them had to kind of go through some things, and both of them really made it all the better for each other. And it's set in Ireland. I heard the audiobook for this as well. Actually, I did listen to the audiobook. What am I saying? Yeah, I did listen to the audiobook, and the audiobook narrator was delicious. And yeah, just set against the backdrop of Ireland, it was just a great escape. It was a great escape, and I loved it. So honorable mention for that one. Next honorable mention is Terror at the Gates by Scarlett Sinclair. Now this is a romantasy, but it is more of an urban romance fantasy. This one follows our main character, who lives in this world where there is basically magic, right? And is a book about our FMC, MMC. It's an urban fantasy. It takes place in sort of like a seedy, sort of city type setting. And she gets kind of an object that brings her a lot of trouble. I think a magical sword. And she has to kind of figure out its secrets. She also comes from kind of a wealthy family that she doesn't really get along with, so she's trying to make it out on her own. And in this story, there's different leaders of different houses that have power, and she gets roped in with our MMC, who is the leader of the house that runs over this city. There is so much horror, like imagery, lots of it kind of does remind me of like old urban fantasy in the best possible way. It's just so fast, very fast paced. The romance is pretty slow burn, and lots lots of world building and lots more world building to come in the following books. And, a very, very black cat heroine, very reserved, very outspoken, but in the best possible way. The Scarlett St. Clair really did her research on this one. It really took her time to develop this world, which is going to be a theme in my favorite books. She really does pay attention very, very equally to both the romance and the world building, hence romantasy, right? And it really does show. So I really appreciated that, and it really does shine in this book, and that's really what sets it apart from other romantasy. So I really enjoyed the heck out of it, and I will be continuing on with the series. The last honorable mention that I have is Soul Searching by Lila Sage. I'm kind of surprised this made the list, but I kept thinking about it afterwards, and I really like it. This book is about a woman who goes back to her small town for reasons that I don't remember right now, which is bad. But she goes back to her small town for reasons, tries to help her family's antique store out, and she also sees ghosts. Book. And then there is the MMC runs like an upholstery store. He's kind of from out of town too. He's trying to figure out what he wants to do. The FMC used to be a photographer, but she's coming back because she's not doing photography anymore, and you slowly learn the reasons why throughout the book. This is about ghosts, but it's also about this. It's essentially a small town romance. So you learn a lot about the different quirky characters around the small town, which I usually don't like, but this one wasn't overdone, so I actually liked it. And I think the other reason why I really liked it too was because we have a black cat heroine and a more kind of soft MMC, which I eat it up. I eat it up every time. What can I say? This is also about a sisterhood, and I think the build-up between the FMC and the MMC was just so well done, which just kind of slowly kind of broke down her walls, and they slowly started to open up to each other, and their banter was a fucking plus. I loved that so much. I do think that, once the romance really kicked off, everything else kind of fell by the wayside, so we don't really learn as much about her family, her sister, the antique store, the ghosts. Lots of questions about that, but it does end, weirdly enough, this one ends on sort of a cliffhanger, so I think the second book is going to be following her sister, which I am going to be all here for. This one wasn't a perfect book, but it sure did a lot of things right for me, so it honestly deserves a place on this list. So, Soul Searching by Lila Sage. Now we're moving on to our favorites. This is exciting. There will definitely be one favorite that I have all year, but honestly, so many of these books are interchangeable. I just love them all pretty much equally, aside from the first book. The first book is definitely my favorite book of the year. Here we go. The first favorite book that I will mention is Tangled Up in You by Christina Lauren, the only non-smutty book in this list. So that's interesting. This one was all the more better for it because this is a contemporary romance based on the Disney movie Tangled. But in this book, Rapunzel was out living on a farm somewhere, and then she goes to college, where she meets Flynn, and she to some shenanigans, and her and Flynn have to end up having to go on a road trip over to, I think, Tennessee, and then somewhere down south, and it's just all about how we figure out life, basically. And I think that's one of the things I love about the Rapunzel retellings, is because there's just so much room to have Rapunzel, she's very naive, she's basically like a child, right? And you're, thrusting her onto the real world, which can be, as we all know, not a very great place, a very scary place, and seeing that character really grapple with life's difficulties outside, but still see the good in, but still see the good in everyone and everything around her. It's just heartwarming. Now, I do think that the way that Flynn was developed in this book really made his abundance of experience over Rapunzel not creepy and overbearing, which I think can be a very fine line to ride. But I think Christina Luna did so well in this book. They really developed his character too. He's a more jaded character. You know, he doesn't have the best family, and they really become each other's rock in this world, and they really feel like they're on equal footing, really, aside from, you know, some things. But honestly, it was such a heartwarming book. Like, so much time and care was taken to developing each of these characters individually, right? Because Rapunzel is being thrust into a newer world. She has a lot of growing up to do, and Flynn also has a lot of things going on in his life as well. And only by coming together and going on this road trip, they really figure out what they want, and they really develop a relationship then, really becoming like strangers to friends to lovers. The blog was amazing. I love that in romance. I like that romances like this can be fun. You can make romances fun, and not just because of tropes or relationships, but really getting to cool places, right? They go on a road trip, they stop by random places, so much care and attention is paid to that, and to the dialogue and the individual relationships together. You make such a great romance. I think this one was really slept on, to be honest, and I think it ended perfectly too. The ending was not rushed, because Rapunzel does go through some bad things. So it was just so good, and it really balanced those heavier things that Rapunzel has had to go through, and that with like more comedic aspects to the book, because it is romance. It is supposed to be lighthearted. So honestly, I think this is really a slept on romance. I think we should all go pick it up. And yeah, one of my favorite romances of the year. Next favorite romance of the year is Bull Rising by Ruby Dixon. This is a romantasy, but it is so good. You'll see that there's a theme here, right? World building. The world building in this book is the best that I have ever seen in any romantasy thus far that I've read, and I've read quite a few to know how the genre really works. The book is set in a fantasy world where there are families who kind of collect magical artifacts, and these artifacts sort of give them their power. Now, she is part of a wealthy family that has kind of gone bankrupt, so she tries to help her family gain back wealth by going to the big city and joining a guild where these families hire these guild members to go out and search for artifacts for them. So it's similar to sort of Indiana Jones in that sense, kind of going on that very classic quest adventure to go out and look for magical artifacts, and that's what she does. Now in this world, there's very few, or there's only been one guild member that has been a woman, so she kind of has to go through that obstacle. This book, and then along the way she meets a Minotaur who is one of the guild members. So in this book, Minotaurs, who are called Taurans, they are more used to. There's other different species in this world too, not just Taurans. There's like lizard people, sort of. I don't really know how to explain it, but the Taurans are basically Minotaurs, and they employed to kind of rescue people who have been going down into these caves to get these artifacts, right? So since they are much bigger, stronger than humans, they're employed to kind of rescue these people out from these places in case there's like a cave-in or something bad happens, right? So our MMC is this Tauren, right? And then it's there's a romance between the Tauren and the FMC, which honestly didn't think would be my thing, but it is, you know, that just proves that if you can write something in a compelling way, like, I'm all for it. I'm literally all for it. Again, the theme here in my favorite books is that there is so much care given to this world, and everything has a purpose, everything has details, there's history and lore, and it's just cool. It's just cool because there are rules to this world, right? And it's just so creative, like, right? Ruby Dixon, apparently. And she also creates wonderful, wonderful romantic tension in the story, because there's an event that happens for the Taurens where they basically go into heat, and then they basically get really horny. So there's like a countdown in the book for that time, right? And that is such a great way to build romantic tension, because at the beginning of the book, the heroine gets into sort of a marriage of convenience with this guy. Where's the tension going to be, right? The tension is coming through them getting to know each other throughout this time before, you know, before this event in the Taran's life. So honestly, lots of great relationship building. You can honestly, this honestly leans a little bit more fantasy almost than romance, but that's a good thing. That is a good thing, because both the fantasy aspect and the romance aspect are essentially 50-50 in this book, and it's just wonderful. This is what I want the romantasy genre to be fun, engaging, and not just copies of one after the other. Yeah, honestly, best romantasy I have read all year. I think it is so underrated. Everyone should go pick this one. This is my favorite book of the entire year, and it is a indie romance. It is called A Love Most Fatal. This book is amazing. First of all, I think this is the other theme of my favorite books, right? The sort of black cat as the female main character and the golden retriever as the main male character, is that to a T. The main female character is a mafia boss, and she, her nephew goes to this middle school, and she one day, you know, picks him up, has parent-teacher conferences with his math teacher, and the MMC is the 7th grade math teacher, and it is so delightful. It is so delightful because 1, it's funny, 2, there's found family, and 3, the romance is so good. It's so good. I think the romance is so good because you can see that there are very real world consequences to the main character being a mafia boss, right? Because you can see her sort of going through her daily life as someone who does use other people to torture other people, right? And although this book is very comedic and funny, the main male character does struggle with what she does and as a living, and wondering if he can really live with that, right? Because they do get into instances where he does get into life or death situations, because he is with Vanessa, who's the FMC. So there is very real world consequences to it, and although I did know how it might end, I also didn't know, which is kind of rare for a romance book. You know, is he going to stay with her and start living her mafia life with her family, because her whole family's in it too. Or is she going to leave being a mafia boss and then continue on living a normal life, right? And a lot of times that answer is very obvious in books, right? Of course the female character is going to move back to the small town. That, you know, it's always moving back to the small town, isn't it? But in this one, you just don't actually know. And actually there's some action throughout the last aspect of the book too. I would say it leans more contemporary romance than mafia romance because of how lighthearted it is. And most of the time is kind of spent talking to each other and learning about her family. But honestly, so good. It's so good. Both of them just love each other so much, and there are definitely circumstances pulling them apart, but then they try to work it out, and it's just great. And it's honestly just a wonderful, cozy time. So that's my favorite book, romance of the year. Let me know what your worst and best romances were this year. And yeah, let me know if you think I forgot any. So yeah, see you in the next video. Bye bye.